Okay, well, hello and welcome to another episode of Innovations in Education. My name is Kevin Hogan. I'm editor-at-large for eSchool News. I'm glad you found us here. Especially glad that you found this episode, a third in a three-part series of our grand prize winners. These are districts that have won the inaugural 2021 Hero Awards. These awards came from this podcast series that I've been doing with eSchool News, where we're looking at best practices in school districts, primarily on response to the pandemic, but really any other sort of ideas or techniques or strategies that districts have been doing in this time to help, instruct, but as unfortunate it is, it's really about protecting students in these past couple of years is obviously the primary goal. With us today, Barrett Puschus. Did I do it right? Puschus, right? See, I told you I'd mess it up. Barrett is at Brevard Public Schools in Florida, and also with us today, Jaron Nichols from PDQ. Jaron, Barrett, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Just want to get started by talking about the fact that we had dozens of submissions from companies that work with eSchool News, where we asked them, what were some examples of your customers, of your districts doing just extraordinary things during this extraordinary time. And there are a number of kind of themes that would pop out from a lot of the submissions. Digital equity, of course, was a big one. Another one was just about access and broadband access and how that used to be kind of a conceptual thing and now it's a real thing. But third was the idea of cybersecurity. And now BP, before the pandemic, as I like to call it, cybersecurity was number one, I think, on the list of concerns for tech directors in my conversations. And while many were waylaid by the pandemic, obviously, it remains a concern. And Barrett, your story kind of, is a perfect example of that. And if you indulge me for a minute, I'm going to read a bit from the submission that talks about basically what you had to deal with. So this was back in October of 2020, and then you got hit. Once you got the notifications, immediately called the rest of your team, working many of them up so they could shut the entire system down. You worked over the next several weeks to evict intruders from the system. Then working closely with the district cybersecurity insurance company to find the exact point of entry for the malware that infected the system. And that was enabled by phishing. You worked across a district of 74,000 students. I mean, this isn't a charter school out in some sort of rural area. I mean, that's a huge population, right? And 10,000 staff to tighten security protocols and prevent another incident. In fact, earlier in the year, that same group of hackers tried to attack the system again, and your IT team worked for a week to protect the district. So extraordinary story. Want to get into the weeds of it. I guess the first question I have, over years of writing and talking about cybersecurity, just the fact that you are brave enough to talk about it at all says something about the work that you do. Usually educators love to share their best practices. They used to love to talk about how they've improved their district scores or they've improved this or that. You get to cybersecurity, people are like, I don't want to talk about it. So as we do start to talk about it, give me your feedback from that time and what that situation was like.
Yeah. So as far as talking about it, we don't succeed in isolation, and we shouldn't fail in isolation. So this is kind of a tale of both. We were notified of the event, and we jumped on it, and we kicked him out. We got him out before the ransom happened. But it really opened our eyes to just how vulnerable we are, and how easy it was for them to get in. They didn't exploit some 0-day issue on one of our external servers. They didn't have any clever IP6 attacks or anything like that. They just sent an attachment to somebody in accounts payable, and they opened it, and our antivirus blocked it. So she replied to the email and said, hey, it didn't work. You know, so he tried the change up, and the change up got through.
Amazing.
Yeah, so they established persistence, and they were in our system for probably 45, 60 days before we knew anything. Just doing the recon, you know, all the stuff you read about today about the lead up to the attack, where they try to spread their you know, lateral movement and spreading their persistence and trying to get data that's, you know, worth selling. And yeah, thankfully we found out about it and got them out ahead of time. We weren't one of the stories where we were ransomed and you know, having to restore from backups or anything like that. Thank goodness.
Yeah, we'll talk about your kind of path to get where you were, that you were able to identify and actually engage them, right? I mean, there are a lot of districts that weren't that far along in terms of their recognition of the need for that sort of protection.
Sure. So you know, we partner with you know, Microsoft and PDQ, and we use a combination of software and scripting and just people, just try to keep an eye on things. But my core group at the network level is very small. It's 12 people. And as such, we all wear a lot of hats, and everyone, it's a very agile group. So I don't have one person that's in charge of servers and one person that's in charge of the firewall and one person isn't, you know, everyone does everything. So when it was time to act, we were able to get everybody moving pretty quickly. And it was nice to have 12 experts on the calls rather than just, you know, my firewall guy, my storage guy, and so forth.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
and talk a little bit about that relationship between Microsoft and PDQ, or actually maybe I'll ask Darren first to, maybe you can talk a little bit about from your side how, well, first of all, you have many different customers with many different stories. What was it about Brevard that that prompted you folks to nominate them as, you know, as a finalist and then ultimately as a winner for the Hero Awards?
Yeah, great question, Kevin. So, I mean, at PDQ, K-12 education is something that is one of our strengths, kind of one of our key industries. And so we have over 2,000 customers today. What stands out with Barrett, I mean, first off, Barrett has a remarkable experience, and I'm sure you've heard about that, and he shared a little bit now. But really what stood out to us, if we're going to be successful, and as he said, isolation is not the way to be successful. And we think of this as a larger community. And Barrett has been a champion to really share both his experience, but even more important maybe is the best practices to either mitigate that experience if anyone else has it, or stop it from happening. And so as we've worked with Barrett, you know, he's been key for us to understanding how can we share those best practices to other customers, but to the community at large. And that's really why we wanted to give that award, or at least nominate Barrett from our standpoint, is just his ability to champion those ideas. Like one kind of thought on that too is, you know, these security threats, Barrett mentioned, some of them are innovating really fast and some of them aren't, but there is like no isolation there. They are sharing best practices and what works and what doesn't work. And you know that if someone's vulnerable, someone's going to share that on their side. We want to make sure that we're doing it on the secure side of things too, so we can patch our own kind of insecurities or issues that we have.
Yeah.
Well, so when I look at these cybersecurity issues, there seem to be two sides of the coin, right? There's one, they're enterprise management, kind of old school corporate, you know, firewall, protect the server. As you said, Barrett, just kind of like that, just kind of like a battle of algorithms, we'd say, right? And then you had the other side of the coin, which is the softer side, like the behavioral, the importance of data security literacy when it comes to administration and staff and students, and now parents, right? When you have remote setups and hybrid setups. Talk a little bit about how you emphasize those two different sides of the coin.
So that's tough, especially as I said, we've got a small group. So tools like PDQ help us handle the algorithm side. We can keep things patched. We can query to see what has what vulnerabilities still, or what has which software on it, what versions we're running, all the boring stuff. I call it the nerd stuff, the stuff that'll put most people to sleep, right? And tools like PDQ make that doable for a group like mine. And I've got other, you know, besides my network group, I've got a tech at all the schools, and they're the primary users. They keep all the workstations up to date and all their school servers up to date. But then the people, we're a big organization, as you said. I think we're right around 10,000 employees, and any organization that has 10,000 employees has turnover. So keeping employees trained, it's a constant task, just keeping everybody aware. So we're trying the stuff that had previously been off limits. Now it's all on the table. We've expanded password requirements. We're doing multi-factor authentication across the board. Everybody from a teacher to a district-wide administrator, everyone's using multi-factor. We're launching phishing simulations, and that's kind of fun. You got to put on your black hoodie, and then you design up a quick little fish and toss it out to a group of people and see if our group competes to see what percentage they can get of responses. So
what's interesting, Barrett, I think, like, it's almost like over the last few years, you've been really successful at having this conversation. You being generally were successful at having this conversation with system administrators. It's that next layer, Kevin, and why we appreciate these conversations. It's helpful is how do you have it with the teachers? How do you have it with the accounts payable clerk? How are they becoming part of this conversation? So that it's not just the stress is on you, but each one of those are breaking points. And I love that example of having phishing simulators or something that puts them in that day-to-day, this is what could happen at any moment. I need to be aware of this conversation that's going on and aware of best practices.
And I'll be honest, those groups seeing this happen firsthand, like since it came in to our accounting department, the first response team gave us machine names, and we sent people physically over there to physically isolate them from the network and bring them back to our data center. So you've got this row of cubicles with various accountants in there, and 2 or 3 people go over there and just completely disconnect the computer and walk away with it, and come back an hour later and grab the one next to it and walk away with it. It opens everybody's eyes, and it gets the leadership talking. And so we're talking from our end, the techs at the schools are talking to the teachers, and now the leadership's talking. Our CIO is doing his best to bring it up at their cabinet meetings every week, just to have something to say about cybersecurity somewhere, just to keep on everyone's mind, because let's face it, it's become a multi-billion-dollar industry. And any industry that's in the multi-billion-dollar range isn't going to stop just because, we're kind of tired of that, or maybe they strengthened their defenses a little bit. They're going to keep coming.
Yeah, it's true. And the bigger the dollar value, the more talented people get at doing it too. It attracts kind of nefarious talent in that sense. Like, I grew up and went to school in Utah, and we used to have earthquake drills where as a student, you'd hear the sirens go off and you'd get under your desk, and I knew what to do. And it just made me laugh when you kind of said, what are some of the things that you do for teachers? And yeah, going through the real experience, you don't want every school district to do that, but maybe a drill, maybe a simulation is the right approach, or one of the approaches.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like you need to create a culture of paranoia a little bit, that you just don't trust anything that's in your inbox, right? Because the phishing does get more and more sophisticated as we go along, and then their ability to get people's names and to make them personalized, would fool anybody.
Yeah.
So we'll talk now about that you kind of are a grizzled veteran of battling these sort of things. What sort of advice would you give districts who, let's say, are a little bit further behind than you are, maybe even haven't started? They might have the technology in hand, but they're not applying it. You talk about Microsoft. There are a lot of tools there that I know that might be just sitting there, not being employed. Give them some advice.
So that's tough, because those things take time and they take people hours. And typically in education, that's where you're short. Our techs, they're not the ones educating the students, so we're nothing but a burden on the payroll from that point of view, from the mission. It is important to keep everybody safe and keep everything going. So I would say you've got to budget your time just like you would budget your dollars. You've got to look at your time and say, what's important. Yes, putting out the fires is important, but you have to have time to be proactive, to analyze your security posture, and you have to set aside time to continuously try to improve it. It doesn't have to be weeks and weeks at a time. It can be, 2 hours every third Friday, but something. You've got to, because if it's not in the front of your mind, how can it be in the front of everyone else's mind, or even on their mind? So I would say just budget your time towards set goals, budget your time just like you budget your money.
One thought, like one thing that I think Barrett and I, you and I have talked about is, yeah, I mean, obviously Brevard has like 75,000 students and 10,000, staff. So it's large, right? But it can literally happen to any school district. We've seen very small ones, this type of thing happen to. So like, to your point, like budgeting your time like you would your money is a good approach. I mean, it's not just education. Like you got to make sure you have monitoring set up. You got to make sure you have the tools. Like don't neglect one of them. And the best way to see if you're neglecting is see if you're spending time on it, or see if you have, some resource that you're using to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about the that first side of the coin, the algorithm side of the coin. What sort of specialization does your team have to have when you're talking about interacting with Microsoft and PDQ? Talk about the dynamic. In the submission, in the contest submission, you were at home, you get this warning sign. You're like, wow, I'm listening to music, I'm outside, but then it became real. Give us the dynamic going forward with that, and how that works with different providers.
So, yeah, the PDQ side is honestly the easiest thing to manage. They've got the auto deployments, and they'll keep an eye on your run times and keep them up to date if you want it to, if you set it up that way. That is a huge help. Like when the response team came in and did their forensics, they're like, you are impressively patched. And I was like, well, that's quite the compliment. Now the Microsoft side, it's a little more complex. Some people have worked with System Center, and now then it was Intune, and then it's endpoint management. So they're a moving target. They're evolving quickly, and they've got this massive suite of products that they're evolving at this pace. So it's tough for my administrators to keep up with it. Our joke is the admin portal is never the same one twice. You go to it today and it's different than when it was yesterday. So again, with that, it's just about being diligent. It's about just taking the time and handle what you can correctly. You got to control the things you can control, and a lot of it comes down to patching. A lot of it comes down to rules, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do that a lot of people don't know they can do, like in the Office 365 suite. If you have a certain licensing level, I think, you can block logins that don't originate from within a certain country. So we've blocked all non-American logins. We haven't had a single person complain about it. Everyone that goes on vacation to Spain isn't trying to check their email, So that's been a huge thing. And now we get these alerts saying that there's some sort of a potential impossible travel scenario. And we look at it, and since it originated out of the country, they never got in. When that password list got, 2 billion passwords got released a few months ago, we saw a huge uptick in just straight up brute force, just going through the alphabet right through our list of people who had names and passwords on that list. Now we had, of course, forced a password change and enabled the multi-factor and all that, but it was still locking our accounts out. When we restricted the logins by country, all of a sudden we're not getting the lockouts. So there's just a lot of stuff you can do in there, and it's tough. You can take classes, you can engage the sales team. The sales teams are usually really helpful at showing you all the cool stuff that other people are doing. But really, it's just collaborating with other districts and other people who are in your spot. Knowledge sharing, that's huge.
Well, and it certainly seems that it's a part of the job description now that maybe you weren't intending when you first got into the business of managing school district networks. It sounds like something out of a Tom Clancy novel now, right?
It's not what I imagined. I was very new to this position when that happened. Wasn't new to the district, but new to the position. And when it happened, I was like, oh man, trial by fire.
Yeah.
Part 2, because we just sent everybody home with COVID for COVID. So then this, it was just a lot.
Well, obviously by the nomination with Jared and PDQ, and by the descriptions of the work and your ability to fend off these miscreants, it's kudos to you. Congratulations for the work you're doing to protect your students and your families. And congratulations to PDQ for helping Brevard fend these folks off too, and all the districts that you do. A great conversation. I appreciate the insights that you're sharing with our readers.
Thank you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a huge shout out to my team. I know I mentioned them a lot in this, but we wouldn't be where we are today without the great team of people we've got. Having the great people is the key.
Absolutely. It sounds like you had a real good first responder SEAL team there to go at it, right?
Yeah.
So, well, thanks again. Appreciate time, Jared. Appreciate your efforts as well.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Barrett.
And thanks everyone for watching this or listening to this episode of Innovations in Education. I'm Kevin Hogan. I hope you click around and find another one soon.